We will now start the meeting of the panel on welfare services. The appointed time, and we have a quorum. Let's take a look at the agenda. And that is the first item, information papers issued since last meeting. No. And items for discussion at the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on the 12th of June, a Monday. The government has suggested that we discuss mental health community support services. However, on the 29th of May, the Joint Committee on Long-Term Care Policy will discuss this. So I don't think there is a need to discuss this again on the 12th of June. And conversely, I am proposing that we discuss the review of LIVA, Low-Income Working Family Allowance, and also the management of the projects under the Lotteries Fund. As we all know, the Audit Commission report has touched on the question of funding by the Lotteries Fund. There has been delay on the funding process and also the project completion date. So I would like to discuss about the management of the projects are funded under Lotteries Fund. So two items. One is LIFA, the other is Lotteries Fund. Any views, members, on these two items? Thank you. So on the 12th of June, we will discuss these two items. Now, we will discuss the proposed legislation to implement the recommendations of the Law Reform Commission report on child custody and access and relevant support measures. This is an item proposed by the government. I know that some members are not members of the panel, but you are here. Welcome. So can we now invite the administration team to join us, please? Welcome. The administration team comprises the Deputy Secretary for Labour and Welfare, Ms. Leonia Tai, PAS, Mr. Kenneth Zheng, and also from the Home Affairs Bureau, PAS, Ms. Karen Chan, and also Assistant Director of Social Welfare Department, Mr. Feng Man Chong, and the Chief Social Work Officer, Ms. Annie Samar from the Social Welfare Department. Welcome. All right. Shall I invite the administration team to brief us on the paper? Yes. Today, we would like to report to the panel on the consultation outcome on the LLC's report on child custody and access. Now, by way of background, the family law in Hong Kong defines parent-child relationship in terms of the rights and authority that parents have over their children. And the LLC in its report on child custody and access suggests that we should introduce a parental responsibility model in Hong Kong, and that means that the parents have continuous responsibility over the children, and the overriding principle is that the best interest of children would be protected. The LWB has consulted the DOJ, SWD, the judiciary, and other relevant bureaus and departments have come up with the draft of the relevant law. And from November 2015 and March 2016, we have conducted a consultation exercise, and we have received a total of 150 written submissions, including those from associations and individuals. Now, of these submissions, around 34.5% supported the implementation of the proposed legislation at this stage, and around 20% supported the proposed legislation in principle, but requested for additional support measures and resources before implementing the proposed legislation, and around 34.5% objected the proposed legislation and doubted the practicability of the parental responsibility model, and the remaining 11% have not clearly indicated their views on the proposed legislation and support measures. So all these views have been outlined in paragraph 4 of the paper, we have received asked views who supported the implementation of the proposed legislation, and we are now scrutinizing the views submitted and will make amendments to the legislation. And we expect the bill will be submitted at the earliest to the LegCo in early 2018. And there are strong views that we should enhance support for divorced families and their children. And the SWD, in the meantime, will continue to promote parental responsibility model and embark on public education. It will also boost the support measures, and this includes a 2-year pilot project on children contact service to help the divorced or separated parents and their children and enhance their contact. We would also be providing support to these families more. This is being run by the Hong Kong Family Welfare Society and commenced operation in September last year. The SWD will take a close look at, monitor closely this pilot project, and will do an evaluation to map out the future direction. Other support measures include psycho-educational programs conducted by the SWD. We think that it has worked effectively, and we will enhance promoting and offering such programs. We would, at the same time, boost training for frontline social workers on co-parenting, parenting coordination, as well as mediation service, so that the frontline social workers can provide better services for these divorced and separated families. And the SWD, with regard to the views collected and our resources, explore other possible support measures further. So much for my presentation, and we're happy to answer questions by members. Thank you. DS? Several members have indicated their wish to speak. Miss Elizabeth Quart, Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, Pun Xiaoping, and Fernando Zheng. Well, we will discuss this until 11:45. I hope that there will be a second round. Let's have the first round first. 4 minutes each for members. Dr. Elizabeth Quart, thank you. I must declare interest first. I'm a master on marriage, and I have dealt with certain cases, but I don't have a direct pecuniary interest. I come from a single-parent family, and I'm concerned about this matter. On this consultation, I have met with many associations and groups which are serving single-parent families, especially single mothers. And in principle, I support the concept of parental responsibility model on the underlying principles, and I absolutely agree or believe that the government is well-intentioned in having this proposal. I am a first-hand person. I'm a person with a first-hand experience myself, and I've handled a lot of such cases. Pending adequate support measures, I don't think we should legislate on the parental responsibility model. In so many cases, we see that parents face a lot of difficulties. For example, it's difficult to chase up for maintenance payment. And on the subject of maintenance payment alone, parents often have fights. So if we are to legislate, there will be more incidents of domestic violence, and more problems will be created, and that might not help with bringing up the children healthily. So pending legislation, I think the government should think twice about setting up one-stop divorce support center to help families, to provide counseling to them, to educate the parents that they should still be good parents after divorce. In terms of maintenance payment, should we be setting up a dedicated organization to help families in that regard? For example, you can provide, say, support, help with the funding, and come up with practical measures to help the families to chase the maintenance payment. Every time when we discuss this, the family coming to me is in tears. They face a lot of difficulties. They can't get maintenance payment, and there is no support from the government. They can't make ends meet. So we are not objecting to this consultation, but it is very controversial, I would say, and I'm very worried that the results will not be as desirable as you thought. So please provide one-stop service for divorced families before you proceed with legislation. I would like to hear a response from the government. DS, please. Thank you, Dr. Kwok, for your comment. As I said, around 1/3 of those who written to what's in the consultation shared Dr. Kwok's view, and whether they doubt whether the model will be effective, and that we should step up support for divorced families and their children. We know that there are strong views on that too, or at least 2/3 of them are having such views. But we have also collected views on individual provisions in the bill, so we will proceed with that first. But then we received strong views that we should enhance support for the families, and the SWD has been working on that all along. Dr. Kwok, we refer to the one-stop service. Actually, in the Integrated Family Service Unit, we are providing various types of services to the divorced families, including counseling service, small groups counseling, and etc. So can I defer to Mr. Fong of the SWD to elaborate on the services? With regard to maintenance payment, it comes under the ambit of HAB. So can I ask Mr. Fong to take that question? I know that IFSC provides all kinds of services, but we are talking about a one-stop service. Chairman, no need to elaborate on that. All of us know what IFSC does, and I myself had a one-year internship at IFSC. But what the IFSC is offering is a far cry from what we are requesting, one-stop service. We are not asking IFSC to work on services for divorced families as well. What we are asking is for a dedicated service for these families. Mr. Fong, thank you. Dr. Kwok, for your comment. Apart from IFSC, our Child Protection Service Unit or Family and Child Protective Service Units are also working on cases, especially those which have been ruled in the court. We are running this 2-year pilot project, and it's been up and running for 7 months, and we are now monitoring its operation. You're talking about the contact service, right? Yes. Well, you're not answering to her question. We're not referring to the children contact service. We are talking about a one-stop support service. Chairman, you heard the reply. He referred to the cases ruled by the court, but cases being handled by the court are already very serious cases. We want a one-stop service to be provided right at the start of the, the divorce process. Mr. Fong? The IFSC has been providing marriage counseling services.
And in fact, before divorce, the parties concerned can go to the IFSC to seek the counseling provided by social workers. As for parenting coordination and related work, and also mediation. In the future, when there is a change of the law, our service will be adjusted accordingly. Whether the law is changed or not, we will strengthen our service in terms of training. As I've said earlier, emphasis will put on parenting coordination and relevant matters. In fact, we have added 6 training courses to our frontline staff so as to enhance their understanding of this matter. Whether what sort of one-stop shop is to be provided after we review our service, and then we'll take into account of the change of the law, and according to actual need, we'll try to get resources for the service. I believe other members will follow this matter up. You say it is not about adding resources or strengthening services. Now you're talking about adding 6 new courses. I don't think that's acceptable to our colleagues. The Home Affairs Bureau may now respond to whether they're going to set up an intermediary body such as a maintenance board. Members will follow that matter up as well. Dr. K.K. Kwok, I have not seen such absurd thing. In the consultation, 1/3 of the respondents objected. The administration tried every means. 1/3 were against. And the administration was asked to do its part. What has the administration done in the paper? Now, they asked for help in getting maintenance, none. All services are lumped into the IFSC. That's a failure, and it has been criticized for years. It's not a supermarket, is it? You just go and pick and choose. The families need experienced social workers who can help them, whether it is marital counseling before divorce, during divorce, or after divorce. How can you put everything into the IFSC? The idea is completely wrong, though this is not the current issue to be discussed at this meeting. That's disastrous. The administration is not done its part. For those who are facing the problem of divorce, recovering maintenance, and parenting, nothing has been done since 2015. They are now just doing a test, a pilot scheme, and there is only a single center in the so-called industrial commercial center. That is really absurd. And there are tragedies in fighting for maintenance and also custody, and there are injuries because of divorce, because of domestic violence after divorce. The administration is just shameless. It comes back to this panel and asks us to support the amendment of the law. Well, if you have not done your part, please forget it. The legislation will lead to more tragedies if there is no support service. The parents are not able to resolve their own problems, and you ask them to jointly look after and nurture the child, there will be more domestic violence, more fights. The administration is just out of its mind. Now, they are all disadvantaged groups. Disadvantaged people. They need help while you resort to the law. If you have done everything and there is no solution, then you resolve it by law, by compellation, by compelling them. It's just a fig leaf. You just amend the law. It is a fig leaf to hide your inability. Since 2015, the administration has been asked to provide many services, and they have only a 0 scorecard. When will they have dedicated service? And what is the resource implication? Tell me. Mr. Fong? Or Ms. Tai? Or maybe Ms. Tai, please. Thank you, Mr. Kwok. With regard to the consultation of the bill, now, it was the result of the parenting model, new parenting model proposed by the LRC report, and therefore we drafted the bill and consulted the public. 1/3 did support the amendment. I'm asking 3 questions. Since 2015, we have received many strong views asking for strengthening our supporting service, and therefore we have the contact the pilot project on children contact service. It's not the only service for divorced families. In fact, the FCPSUs have provided the service. The pilot scheme is to provide an additional service apart from those decided in the court by the court. Other parties can also make use of this contact service. As for life education and also training of frontline staff, and also the concept of co-parenting and parenting coordination, there are professional training courses for frontline social workers so that they can promote the idea, and also they can promote public education. I asked for resources. Now, please don't talk about concept. It's useless. What actually have you done? And what resources? How many bodies have you put to this? As for the contact service center, there are $1.5 million from Lord Triswan. That's shameful. You spend $110 billion on the Hong Kong Macau-Zhuhai Bridge and $90 billion on the express rail, and also another $100 billion on the WKCD. You just pay $7.5 million for a service for the divorced family. What have you done for them? These families are having a lot of problems. Divorce, maintenance, and the response is just $7.5 million since 2015. It's just peanuts. And you're going to give $5.4 billion to Disneyland, and then another $6 billion to the AIIC. The government is really doing nothing for the people, and there is a need to condemn the government. The administration just turned a blind eye to divorce services. The divorce rate in Hong Kong is very high. $7.5 million for 2 years to deal with the high divorce rate in Hong Kong. The high number of divorce cases in Hong Kong is really upset, and no wonder members have such a strong response. Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Just now, the administration said that 34.5% of the respondents supported the proposal and 34.5% opposed. So there is no consensus in the community, and I really don't understand why the administration insists on legislation in 2018. What's the reason for that? What's the real reason for that? Please come clean. 20% of respondents strongly asked for strengthening support. Now you have a 2-year pilot project on children contact service. You have done it for 7 months already. What is the situation in the past what was the situation in the past 7 months? As for those who oppose the proposed legislation, there are 4 major objections to that. What is your response to these reasons for objection? Ms. Tai. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Poon. Concerning the progress of the bill, with regard to the bill, we have received comments on individual provisions, and about 30% or so supported the proposal, and some supported the proposal in principle. 20%. Well, therefore, we work on amending the bill, and then after internal discussion on how to proceed, we will go ahead and with an internal discussion on how to proceed, and we finally decide on legislation. It will only be 2018, the earliest. As for the opposing views, basically they doubt whether the model is feasible, and they mainly ask for strengthening support service. We've heard the view. Whatever the progress of legislation, the SWD has been strengthening its service. As for further strengthening service, that will be based on the views of obtained during the consultation, and that will also be dependent upon resources. You say there is no consensus and therefore nothing is done. But why this time you insist going about it, though there is no consensus, 1/3 for, 1/3 against, and you say you can still go ahead? Why you insist on that? What is the urgency of doing this now, even if you don't have the support services? You have not addressed the question. Now we have come to the stage of looking into the comments on individual provisions, and we will amend the provisions of the bill. And after that, we will conduct an internal discussion. Together with other views, we will make a decision whether we will submit the bill to the Council or not. If we do so, then from a technical point of view, we can do that by 2018. Well, we do need to go through a discussion process concerning the way forward. Members have spoken very clearly that it's not about technical matter, it's not about individual provision, it's about provision resources, provision of services, and also urgency of the matter. Is it really so urgent to legislate? Would it help by legislating? Would this help the divorced families? That's without doubt. Next, Dr. Fernando Cheung. With regard to the legal reform on child custody and access, and the community has great reservations, and I also have strong reservations. Nobody can go against the principle. If you say parents have the responsibility, continuing responsibility to look after the children, whether they have divorced or not, nobody can doubt it. And also the divorce arrangement should take the best interest of the children as the overriding principle. That's a principle nobody can object. But as far as the law is concerned, as far as the proposed bill, we have not seen the implementation of these principles. Say, for example, the best interest of children. In the law, according to your legislative proposal, how can that be realized? If you ask for shared responsibility, then there are conflicts among the parents, and there might have been domestic violence, and you force them together to discuss important decisions of their children. Isn't that absurd? The father is unwilling to pay maintenance, and yet he has a say on which school the son should attend. He doesn't take the responsibility, and yet he has a say. He can interfere. He can stand in the line. He can stand in the way. And that is harassing to the ex-wife.
And in the UK and Australia, they have reservations on such reforms, and actually some of them are backpedaling. The government is not providing adequate service. There is only one children contact service. It's just a pilot project now. So, Ms. Tai, you are out of touch with reality. Social workers have to monitor the custodial rights of the parents, and they are now arranging for the access to be done in public places, for example, fast food shops and parks. And this is most undesirable. You said that this is just a pilot project. Well, you should have already done it long ago, and there should be at least one in every district of our 5 districts. And the quota for this pilot project has been filled. We don't have enough resources. When will you set up this maintenance board? The parent doesn't want to pay, but he's asked to shoulder the responsibility. So this proposal is out of touch with reality totally. So can I ask the administration or the HAB in particular, to tell us, pending the problems of maintenance being unresolved, you should not deal with this. When would you set up the maintenance board? We've been talking about the problem of maintenance for over a decade. What is the progress of your work now? The government has been working very hard on the maintenance system, and we have carefully studied into the proposal of maintenance board. We think that for this proposal to the relevant parties and also the parents, the board will not help in improving the system. The government has implemented a number of administrative measures in improving the maintenance system, and we have done a lot of public education. In February this year, we have submitted a paper on the same to the panel on welfare services. I'm not going to repeat those points. And it's been quite some time since we last studied the matter. And in order to to better understand how the maintenance order is being implemented now, we will conduct a consultancy study later on, and we will report the results of the study to the HA panel. The company engaged by us will also be asked to look at overseas jurisdictions in relation to maintenance system. We understand the stakeholders concerned. We hope to get the latest update through the study by the consultant, and we would explore future directions ahead. I think the script that she has read out is just a joke. So you will continue studying forever, right? This script applies to all government work. So it means, in other words, that you do not plan to work on it now, right? I think we have a consensus on this. All of us want to have a maintenance board. It's just the government doesn't want it. We understand the stakeholders' concern, but then the information in relation to maintenance order is not very complete now. So we need to engage a consultant to collect the latest information and study into overseas practice as well. We need to adopt an evidence-based approach. And apart from collecting information and statistics, we will also ask the consultant to conduct a questionnaire survey and talk and meet with the stakeholders. They will hold focus groups as well through various avenues. We'll try to understand the stakeholders' concerns and views. So do you plan to spend, say, millions of dollars for the consultant to do the study? We haven't started the tendering exercise. Well, every study of the government costs several $million. Chairman, we can't give you the figures. Well, if you have that money, why don't you spend it on setting up more children contact service centers? There is only one now. What is the utilization rate right now? And Dr. Zhang wants 5 to be set up, at least. Would you consider that? I'm not very concerned about the cost for the consultancy study. What I'm concerned is that the money is well spent. Would you review the utilization rate of the children contact center? Is there, say, a 100% utilization rate or what? Up to this month, on the 4th of May, for this pilot project, we are working on 55 cases. In our design, we have to work on 135 cases per year. So there is still capacity for us to take on more cases. We know that the HKFWS has worked very hard and has publicized the service among different stakeholders, including the judges and the law associations and society, and also various NGOs, etc., to promote the service. For most of the cases, they come from the FCPSUs and others from the family service centers of other NGOs. And some of the cases are having, say, parents coming to us on their own initiative. Some are being referred to us by the lawyers. So after this pilot project, what are you going to do? Do you have plans to set up a total of 5? We will conduct a review and look at the situation. As I mentioned, generally speaking, for cases with some sort of court orders, they will be dealt with by the FCPSUs. And when we designed this pilot scheme way back, we aimed to provide service to families without court orders and who need to have sort of a custody and access by parents. So we would review the pilot scheme, what difficulties are encountered, and so on. Every year, while 400 cases have to be dealt with by the court every year, but for our pilot scheme, well, upon its completion, it can only deal with around 100 cases. So, well, the demand is going to outstrip the supply. Well, don't tell us that there is back capacity. No, that's definitely not the case. I've talked to the Family Welfare Society. The appointment time is getting longer and longer now. Let me make this very clear up front. So perhaps maybe the panel members, we can all visit to this service center to get a first-hand experience of how it works. Next, we have Mr. Eunice Yong, followed by Leung Chi-Cheng, Roy Kwong, Leung Yu-Chong, and Dr. Lau Xiu-Lai. Ms. Eunice Yong, Chairman, the HWB said that it has received 150 written submissions from associations and individuals. I don't see a breakdown and who support and who object to the proposals. Can you give us a detailed breakdown of these submissions? Those who are supporting and objecting are very much similar in number, so we want clearer figures. With regard to parental responsibility model, how is it different from the joint custody model in terms of education for the children? The lawyers have been talking all the time to parents, hoping that they can have joint custody because the parents should bear responsibility. They know about their own responsibility. Do we need a piece of legislation to tell them that they have responsibility? Do you want to penalize the parents for not providing for their children, or do you incorporate an education element in this? Now, if you're talking about educating the parents, I think the joint custody model has already worked. The judges and courts have told parents many times the responsibilities the parents should have, and this is also the principle of our law. In paragraph 41A, you talked about the underlying principle of this model is the best interest of children should guide all proceedings concerning children, and it's more child-focused and promotes the continued involvement of both parents in their children's lives, even after divorce. That is also the same. That principle is also the same under joint custody model. Maybe one parent cares for the daily lives of the child, but then the other parent should also have responsibility as well. So I really am not very clear about the real underlying principle about this parental responsibility model. Now, a colleague has also referred to the fact that, the parents will be at a loggerheads whenever they were talking about divorce. So if we put them together by force, will we be creating more legal disputes? And as a result, the family court will have a heavier caseload to deal with. And I also agree with the suggestion that more support measures and resources be allocated. You are providing this pilot project on children contact service from September to 2016 to now, around half a year in between. How effective is it, the program? How many people have participated? How many frontline social workers have taken part? And what are the results? What kind of support are you providing to frontline social workers? Will you be providing more meeting venues? Would you be helping them with the meeting arrangements for the families involved? The parents are not on good terms with each other. So when there is access or custody, access of the children, social workers have to be present. So can you provide us with supplementary papers on the details, statistics? On Ms. Young's question, the underlying principle of the bill and also the principle of the joint custody, there is a difference in terms of the, say, the custodial order and access order and so on. It seems that the parents have the rights and authority, but under the responsibility model of the LRC, we are talking about the child arrangement orders instead of the old orders. So we start with the best interest of children, how they should be cared for best. So we are not talking about the custodial order. So there is really a great difference between the two concepts. So that's why the LRC has proposed this change. Now, with regard to the access arrangements, as what Mr. Fong said, the Hong Kong Family Welfare Society is helping us with that service. We have now 55 cases. And the social workers are providing support in such a service. We have also strengthened training for frontline social worker service, not just for the sake of this pilot project, but on the whole to let the social workers better understanding so that they have more professional knowledge, so that they can better deal with divorce cases. Can Mr. Fong supplement? Effectiveness of the service and also the establishment of the service. This is just a pilot project which will run for 2 years. We've just started running it for several months. There we now have 55 cases. To our understanding, we will arrange for the parents to come together to come up with the best time for contact with the children. Social workers will be present, and we will make the best arrangement for the parents and the children. We will continue to liaise closely with the Family Welfare Society. We talk to them once every fortnight to ascertain the effectiveness of the project, and we will conduct a review later on. Staff establishment, how many workers are on the working on the project? You're talking about lump sum grant again? This is a pilot project. We have a lump sum from the lotteries fund, which will be given to the organization that is the Family Welfare Society. We will have a certain requirements on the staff involved, and we will respect the autonomy of and flexibility of the HKFWS in deploying their workers. How many social workers are on this project? 4 social workers. In Hong Kong, 4 social workers are handling the 300 cases which are being handled by the family court.
As are cases before the family court. They are mainly handled by the FSC SPU. As for the pilot scheme, it is the result of receiving comments that there is about cases not before the court. That is the only contact service center, and there are only 4 social workers. You have difficult to explain yourself. Well, the design is handled by 135 cases a year. They will keep an eye on the situation, and manpower will be provided accordingly. The NGO has agreed to keep an eye on the situation. Don't blame the NGO. I think the panel needs to visit the contact service center to talk to the staff directly. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. Many members have criticized the administration for ignoring the giving support to divorced families. 4 social workers serving at the contact service center. That obviously is not enough. And people therefore doubt whether it is necessary to legislate on the parental responsibility model. The government has not done its part, and then the model is changed, and there will be consequences. And the concern is justified. You have to listen to this. If you just ram it through, there will be more problems. The government will have to put in more resources to bring in the cure, and that may not be good. I do support the parenting model. The family, it is a divorced family, but parents continue to care for the children, and they have authority over the children. I think the amendment is necessary. The question is about time, and you have not solved the problem, not even the manpower problem. Now we provide services at the district level. We receive many cases. After a divorce, there is a problem of maintenance, a problem of housing, and also the relationship between the divorced children and their parents. Sometimes just the father or mother has disappeared. After legislation, how can you deal with this? It will become even more serious. No one will care for the child. Now the child may be living with the mother, and the father is working not in Hong Kong, is working outside Hong Kong. And then the father can blame the model for requiring him to come back to Hong Kong and share the parental responsibility. Now we do need to consider the interests of the child, but you also need to consider the relationship between the divorced parents. Though a little bit more people are supportive of the proposal, but at least 1/3 are against the proposal, and that cannot be ignored. I think you shouldn't just want to do something good. You shouldn't do a bad thing just because of you have a good intention. And there is a need to enhance your supportive service before you change the law. Don't you think so? Who would like to respond? Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Leung. We've heard members' views. What you said is right. 1/3 are against the proposal. The legislative proposal will consider the views very carefully. As for supportive services, whether we amend the law or not, we will strengthen our services. We recognize that. We will do it within existing resources, and we'll try to get resources to do more. Well, you cannot check your parental responsibility, but can that be a parental responsibility system? If it is a system, then you need support and execution. The Vice Chairman, Mr. Kwong. The Family Welfare Society is not getting a recurrent funding for the service. I'm a district councillor. I have handled many cases which are asking for help to recover maintenance. The families have nowhere to turn to. There is no maintenance board to get help. There are divorced wives who have been asking for maintenance from their former husbands or their ex-husbands. Some are very bad guys. Now they are in conflict, and they go to ask the ex-wives ask for maintenance. They keep asking, but the ex-husbands refuse to pay. In several cases which I've handled, in fact, the ex-husbands are very rich. They have several pieces of property, they own shares, but they go before the court. They said that they don't have the money, they are poor. You really need professional help to deal with these cases. The present maintenance recovery mechanism is not adequate. I think maintenance is the minimal, and yet the administration is not able to give people confidence that the government is able to help in terms of recovering maintenance. I just hope that there can be a hearing on this, and I would like to listen to more views on this. Now, there are only 4 social workers of an NGO to work on this pilot program. And usually you don't know what is the way forward after a pilot program. You don't know whether it will become a regular service, whether there will be more resources of that, whether the pilot will be lengthened to handle more cases. I'm really unhappy with that. If you don't provide the supporting service and you just go ahead with legislation basing on your report, the views are divided. The administration has to work hard on this. So my question is whether there's a chance to hold a hearing and whether you will expand your contact service. Now, a member suggests the organizing of a hearing, public hearing. If there is no objection, then we'll go ahead. Okay. Okay, the next question should be answered by the Bureau. As for the pilot scheme, we've tried to explain that. We deal with those cases that have no court order. We have given the money to the Family Welfare Society. There are 4 workers handling the cases. We know that there are 4 social workers with more cases. The FWS will arrange the manpower accordingly. We will gauge the success of the pilot scheme before we can decide on the way forward. I will collect the views on implementing of the pilot, and then we'll decide on next step. I hope Ms. Chen will respond to the second part of the question by the Vice Chairman on maintenance. The HKCSS and the Baptist University have done several studies on maintenance. 88% of the respondents suffered from delay in payment of maintenance. It's not that they don't want to recover maintenance, but this legal process is very complicated. The debtor cannot be found, and therefore maintenance have not been recovered. 88% of that. So it is not just education that can help. You really need to have an intermediary to deal with the cases. We have been discussing that since the late 1990s. You say there is no data, no information, therefore you need to commission another study. Is it really outrageous? Now, last time when we conducted an in-depth study, it was in 1999-2000. In preparing information for the panel, we talked to the institutions and departments concerned, and our assessment is that we do not have adequate data and information, and there has been different development different kinds of development in overseas countries. Therefore, we will ask the Family Council to appoint a study. We've consulted a committee under the Family Council, and we expect that we can soon conduct a tendering exercise. We'll keep an eye on the enforcement of maintenance order. The chairman referred to the April study by the HKCSS. It was a study on divorced single-parent families, and there was a proposal to step up public education. And we will work on this. We'll continue to work on this. Since 2001, we have introduced a participation scheme on maintenance, and we have subsidized more than 70 programs. Since 2009, since the year 2000, they finished study. 17 years have elapsed, and you now say you don't have information. You didn't do anything. You say you don't have any information, and therefore you will conduct another study. I think you will only have a report in 2018, and nothing has been done. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, as for access rights, in some cases, both parties cannot reach a consensus, even if there is a court order. Because of poor relationship between the parties concerned, there are problems of access to children. There's a need to have a contact service center. Yet manpower is very small in providing the service. What's the purpose of pilot scheme? What do you want to see? What do you want to find? Suppose there's really a need to provide such a service. What will you do? Will there be 5 contact service centers, 1 in each region? Or will there be just 1? Mr. Chung or Dr. Chung proposed 5 because there was 1 single-parent service center in each region, and there were 5 altogether. And it was quite successful. And the center did provide a good service to the single-parent families and their children. So I just want to know, what would you do with regard to the pilot? I think visiting or having access to the child is not the major issue. The major issue is maintenance. If maintenance is paid, there will be no more arguments, and then access will be arranged more easily. Now, the ex-wife takes care of the child, and she cannot work, and if no maintenance is paid, then they have no means of living, no money for even to support the education of the child.
And Governor Officer, that from in 1999 and 2000 there was discussion on this matter, and now you're proposing another study, focus groups and so on. Well, let's do away with all these. Just take reference from overseas practices and then do it. Do we need another consultation? We said that we needed this. There is no opposing view on setting up a maintenance board. So, are there any drawbacks of setting up this maintenance board? We haven't heard any drawbacks so far. So let's explore how we do it rather than whether we should do it. Can you consider that? I am not against conducting a study. Rather, we should discuss how the study should be done. With regard to the pilot project, it will run for 2 years. We have been liaising with the FWS closely, and the SWD will evaluate this project. covering the operation model, the response, etc., and also the resources before we map out the future direction of development, whether we should set it up in 5 regions or what. We'll have regard to the results of our evaluation. Again, on maintenance, can I ask the HJB colleague to respond? Ms. Chen. In our upcoming study, apart from collecting local data, the number of maintenance orders issued and the execution and enforcement situation, we will also collect information on overseas practices to see whether they are applicable to Hong Kong. What is the what is the direction for your study? Will you consider setting up or not setting up the maintenance board? Ms. Chan, we don't have a full set of information, how many maintenance orders have been issued, the amount in default, etc. We need to collect all these statistics first. What you can do, collect the statistics in 50 minutes online, because we have internet these days. You don't need to take so much time. Dr. Lau Xiu Lai, Kok Wai Keung, and Leung Kwok Hong. I don't think that we can arrange for a second round. We have to go into the second item. Dr. Fernando Zhang has a motion, so we will deal with that as well. Dr. Lau Xiu Lai. Many colleagues have been following on the same question, and the government official is just rehashing the old line. I have a similar question, but so I don't need your response. I would like to share more information on the present situation. The government officials may be well-intentioned, but it's just like a secondary school student who wants to put out the best homework without regard to the reality. Do we need this kind of sophisticated model when we are facing so many problems right now? Now let's take a look at these divorce cases. There are so many conflicts and arguments between the parents. Many fathers in the divorce cases will not pay maintenance. 90% of the ex-wife have not resorted to legal channels to recover the maintenance. It's not that they don't want to it. They are single parent all the time, and they don't have the time to go through the very cumbersome legal procedures. Even if they do that, the husband would have lots of ways and means to deter them from doing so. In some cases, some of them will take their children to the new families, and the children suffer a lot mentally in some cases because the husband doesn't want to pay maintenance. When he meets with the family, the wife, and he is abusing the wife physically, and this is a real case, and he's saying bad things about the mother in front of the child, and the child is suffering psychologically. In fact, a lot of our parents don't know how to be parents. We want to monitor them so that they share parental responsibility. Well, maybe it will cause greater harm to the families. We lack resources. I think we should first help parents to be better parents. We should not be forcing this responsibility upon the parents. And it's unrealistic and not good to ask the joint responsibility of the parents to help make important decisions for the child. Have you provided adequate counseling service for parents so that they know how to be good parents? Have you tried to resolve the problem on maintenance? Have you tried to streamline the procedures, the legal procedures? I think you are doing bad things out of good intention. You would be inflicting harm on the women and children instead. So start with the first step first. Set up the maintenance board so that the women can get out of poverty, and then try to provide counseling service to parents so that they can be good parents, and then you can work on access rights before you you can talk about changing the culture of the society and introduce parental responsibility model. You will be doing bad things out of your good intention. If you don't do what I suggested. Dr. Lau Xiulai, thank you for your comment. Your view is very similar to 1/3 of the views that we have received. We have heard you clearly, and we will consider your views. Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Several points from me. Changing a rights model to a responsibility model. Well, on paper, it is a change of a term, but in reality, if it is going to operate, can that really help and boost support for the families involved, whether it's the recovery of the maintenance payment and the operation of access rights, etc. The government should take a careful look on all these aspects. Recently, I have received a case, no maintenance payment is made, and the court has ordered that the husband can still meet with the child. So that's problem number one. I'm a male myself, but I can't really speak in favor of the male. This husband is creating nuisance or harassing the family, and the judge said that this person has a very poor attitude, but still he's given this access right, and the mother and the child feel very bad. How come that this happened? Now, if we are change the model from one of authority to responsibility, will it help? The husband will still continue to get this access rights, and the child will still meet with somebody he doesn't want to meet. Is there any way to help this mother and the child? So, SWT, thank you, Mr. Kwok, for your question. Under our bill, our underlying principle is that there will be a statutory list, and which should be taken on board by the court and the judge in deciding what orders he should make. With regard to Mr. Kwok's case, after the bill is enacted, if, say, one party is being harassed by another, he can apply for this prohibited steps order from the court and ask for the court to make a ruling that the husband will not have this access right. So in the new law, there would be clear stipulations on that, and the judge is empowered to make certain orders after hearing submissions from all sides. Can that really be feasible? This husband went to the mainland and tried to pry open the doors of the home of the mom and dad-in-law. Of course, he's also done many other things as well. For acts committed on the mainland, will those be considered by Hong Kong courts as well? After hearing the mother's what the mother said, I think that the parents should not have contact at all, and it is difficult for the mother to recover the maintenance, and the mother would not like to have any contact with the husband whatsoever. So has the court considered all these? We should not be asking the single parent to face the very unreasonable demands of the other party. Well, we've heard that this is what some mothers called the secondary infliction of pain or what. So you've heard about this all the time, but you've not responded. Now, different families face different problems. In the future, the law may be able to help And for now, we attach a lot of importance to cases, especially cases with domestic violence. The SWD has done a lot to help these families. And then the mother in the case you mentioned can seek help from the social workers of the SWD. The social worker may talk to the court and about the special circumstances of the case and seek further help. So please stay for a while yet, because after Mr. Leung Kwok has spoken, then we'll deal with Dr. Fernando Zhang's motion. Last, we'll have Mr. Leung Kwok. I think the issue is rather straightforward. Would you set up a maintenance board? Will you do that? There will be a channel for the women to recover the maintenance. So these women do not have to be sort of put in unnecessary risk. Would you consider doing that? HAB colleague, please. Thank you, Mr. Leung. We have discussed this matter at length. Just now, the government's stance is very clear. We've strived to improve the maintenance system, and in the past, we have carefully studied into the matter. And back then, we thought that to the payee or the taxpayers, the idea will not bring any significant improvement to the system. Well, no need to go on. No need to go on. You did a study, and some people do not object to your amending the law, but were asking for certain improvements to be made. But you said that you will not hear their views, right? Well, because one of the proposals is whether we should is to establish a maintenance board. Well, 30% support and 20% support the legislation on the grounds that there will be improvement. So you should not be amending the legislation then. Some 30% said support the legislative amendment, but some 20% that support measures should be implemented before legislation. You haven't even been able to get a majority, a simple majority. I think you should cut your salary. Can that be done? All of us suggest that you should have your cut pay, but then you said that you should get a pay increase instead. You're wasting our time. You should serve for the public of Hong Kong. The women are so scared. They're scared and they're worried about recovering maintenance payment, and the husbands are not willing to pay maintenance. Yet they get the chance to see the child. Well, let's say if somebody doesn't want to pay a tax, and then I would take you to task because you're not providing me with any service. Well, I think this is the same as what's happening to the women here. Well, according to public opinion, you should not do this. We are asking for a maintenance board to be set up. You should set up more children contact service centers, etc. And you're not willing to do it. You don't have the support from the polls for you to do it. How can you legislate without adequate public support for the proposal? Mr. Leung, thank you for your comments.
Now, one-third during the public consultation supported, one-third objected to, and 20% expressed the view that they would support if certain supportive measures are enhanced. We'll take into account all of these. Now you say if the maintenance board is not good for public funds and not good for those who need help, then the 20% of the views are outrageous. You have hit rock bottom. Same for your contact center. You hit rock bottom. Women want to get maintenance So you should arrest those who defaulted on maintenance. It's a kind of domestic violence, isn't it? I also asked a question on CSSA and maintenance. Now, if one has received maintenance and one CSSA amount is cut. Now, you also need to, do you need to prove to the SWD that you keep trying to recover maintenance in order to get CSSA's payment? Chairman, say whether the man or the woman, usually a woman, say is given a maintenance order by the court, and if the recipient is not able to get maintenance payment, then the recipient should report to the SWD. We will look into the case and refer the case to the legal aid department. But I think that is a window of half a year. She tries to recover maintenance, but she is not able to get full support from CSSA during that half year. Is it the case? Well, it depends on the actual situation. The CSSA payment will be made according to need. The Social Security unit will help, but the Social Security unit is not so helpful. I think they just rub salt into wound. Now they are not able to get maintenance, to obtain maintenance, and their CSSA payment is also cut. We really need to organize a public hearing, and we also need to visit the contact service center. Dr. Fernando Cheung, please introduce your motion. Thank you, Chairman. I'll read out the motion. It's very simple. Since there are strong reservations towards the legal amendment towards custody and child custody and access because of inadequate support, the panel urged is of the view that a maintenance board should be set up to provide assistance to single-parent families, strengthen the prevention of divorce, and provide support to divorced families, and set up contact service centers in each region and promote parental responsibility. Those in favor, please raise their hands. It is unanimously carried. All right, we draw a line here for this particular agenda item, and we'll organize a public hearing, and we will also conduct a visit. We now move on to the next topic on the agenda, and that is support services for singletons. We have overrun a bit. That will be an AOB item. The AOB item is in respect of invitation to multi-stakeholder forum on aging towards APEC and AFPPD Standing Committee meeting on active aging as observer. The forum has invited the Legislative Council to send 3 legislators representing the Council to attend a forum on active aging. The forum will be held in Vietnam. Let us move on to support services for singletons. I welcome representatives from the LWD, the SWD, the Home Affairs Department, the LWB representative. Thank you, Chairman. The item is support services for singletons. It covers quite a wide area. We have an internal discussion, and we provided a paper as follows. It does cover social welfare and then housing. In terms of social service, There are 65 integrated family service centers providing a spectrum of preventive, supportive, and remedial welfare services, including sound counseling, volunteer training, so on and so forth. Referrals are made for singletons and other persons to seek direct support, for example, community support service, community care service, financial assistance, such as CSSA. To early identify the singletons that are so-called hidden singletons, in July, we'll introduce a support scheme through telephone, through visits, and other means. We try to contact those singletons who are quite aloof. We will also invite people who have similar experience and who have come out to lend support to these singletons. They will be encouraged to build social networks and mutual support networks. The paper also provides the provision of housing support to singletons. Starting from the 1st of February 2015, there is introduction of the new quota system, and there is also information on hostels for singletons. The relevant concerns have been considered, and we have also the Housing Department and Home Affairs Department represented here to speak on the provision of housing to singletons. So much for my introduction. We'll listen to members' views very carefully. Now, this is an item which is rather broad, but being single is a choice, and also there's a global trend towards this. Support is not just welfare support, but there should also be support in terms of housing and also support in terms of daily lives. Dr. Kwok, Mr. Leung Yu Chong, Dr. Lau Siu Lai, Mr. Chen Chi-chun have indicated want to speak. Chairman, I really don't know how to comment on the information paper. They tell us that all these are not for the singletons. They put it in the IFSC's, the family support program. They are single. They don't belong to a family. As for the CSSA, CSSA is not helping singletons, in fact penalizing singletons if they are not elderly. The support given is very small. As for public housing, is really absurd. They say they are generous. If you are age 45 or above, 60 points will be added. After adding 60 points, what's the use? You think 60 points is a big deal. Now, if you are 19, you get 9 points, and then 9 points per year. So you are added about 7 years, points for 7 years. But singletons have difficulty in getting a public rental housing unit, as rare as winning a Mark 6 lottery. There is no targeted service for the purpose of helping singletons. The scorecard is next to 0. You are the AS. Let me tell you that there is no single policy to support the singletons, be that housing needs or be that financial needs. What is your policy? It's very clear. Can the AS answer the question? Is there no policy specifically designed for singletons? Well, in terms of our policy areas, in terms of social welfare, you can see that it is family support program, but the program does support the needs of singletons. And the social workers, the professionals, do consider the needs of the singletons and provide the needs accordingly. It cannot just be so general to say that there is no policy to help the singletons. So we do provide help to singletons. I've not seen such an outrageous official before. You just admit it, that there is no policy. There is no policy specifically for singletons. Sometimes people put up a show. Some try to pull wool over our eyes. There will be a study. After 2 years, there will be a proposal, and then 3 years, there will be implementation. Now there is none. They say they refer it to the IFSC. It's easy to attend the welfare service panel. The IFSC is the panacea. We discuss maintenance. We discuss divorce and then parental custody, things like that. They refer it to the IFSC. And now for singletons, they also refer to IFSC. The IFSC is a cure-all medicine, like the magic bag from Doraemon. When you receive such a paper, I ask the chairman to tell the secretary, the policy director, policy bureau director, that the official should be reprimanded. Mr. Kwok, are you going to complain against the officials that they don't cheat you? You just ask them to cheat you, do you? Don't you? Well, I'm just trying to be ironic. So usually the officials just put up a show. They try to cheat us. But this time they even couldn't care to cheat. And I'm disappointed. Mr. Leung Yu-chung, I do agree with Dr. Kwok. But I know that the official has a hard time. He is frank, and you don't allow him to be frank. He's just honest. Well, we just try to be ironic or sarcastic. There is an issue before us. Shouldn't the administration review its various policies in respect of support towards the singletons? Can more support be given? Can improvements be made? Yet, they just come here and they speak according to the basic law. Everything is kept 50 years and change. The situation of the singletons are worrying. A few months ago, we went out in an evening in Sam Shui Po. We saw singletons sleeping in front of a market, beneath a flyover, also staying at McDonald's overnight. Is there a policy to help them? You just say that in 2015 there is a point system, and you claim that's a big achievement, but in fact the point system cannot help. The singletons are just waiting and waiting for a public housing unit. Can you solve the problem? Well, Dr. Pork just wants you to soothe him by saying that there will be a review of the policy, but you don't say anything on that.
Can you consider conducting an overall review on the policies on singletons so that their situation can be improved? Administration, will you conduct an overall review or comprehensive review? Yes, we will listen carefully to members' views. Say, in terms of public housing, if there is anything that we can do, we will certainly study it. Now, if you ask us to conduct a comprehensive review on our policy towards singletons, and I can't make that promise. But say on certain policy areas, say social welfare, then we would take a close look at those aspects and see how we can further enhance our policies. This is the approach that has been adopted all along. in relation to public housing, can we divide the queue for singletons into two queues, one for the non-elderly, one for the elderly, so that they can line up separately? For some singletons, who might be relatively young, and maybe they will be offered a flat, say, in 1 to 2 years' time. Then all of a sudden, some elderly singletons have been given a higher priority. Then they don't get the flat themselves. So we've been talking about this for the last 4 and 5 years. So can people be given a real expectation on when they can be offered a flat? Because right now they can't really project realistically the time for getting a flat. Mr. Leung is asking about whether you have a dedicated policy for singletons when you conduct an overall review. In 2016, in your statistics, you said that 367,000 people. 2016 is 460,000 people. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of singletons in Hong Kong. This is no small amount. So you can't just having some other units or service units working on them or providing service to them at the same time when they are serving other people as well. We will also follow up on the question of, say, hostels and things like that later on. Dr. Fernando Zhang. In our society, we are very mean to singletons, in particular the male singletons. We provide the least support to them. For the QPS, for the singletons under the HA, well, in fact, they don't get any chance at all in getting a flat. If they're not an elderly person, they have a long time to wait. And for CSSA, for singletons, the rent allowance under CSSA will not be enough for them to rent, say, a bed space or subdivided unit. In the past, the HAB has provided some singleton hostels. Associations working on the street sleepers have all along asked the government to revisit the idea of building singleton hostels. The CY Leung has proposed a youth hostel. Several thousand units will be provided. They are not completed yet, but at least he's trying to help young people to get a flat. But for singleton hostel, we have two only, providing 580 flats only. They are filled to capacity. People have to wait on the queue. So HAB, do you have any plan to again build hostels with singletons? They can help the street sleepers very much. Can we build again singleton hostels in the urban areas, and these can help the poor singletons? Well, if I may add, Dr. Zhang, 1991, we started the singleton hostel program. We had 26 then. Where have these 26 hostels gone? Would you restart the program? Ms. Wong from HAD. Thank you. For the singleton hostel program run by the HAD, they are there, or it is a designated project to tie in with the introduction of the licensing regime under the Bed Space Apartments Ordinance implemented in 1994. So for those affected under this ordinance, they could have a temporary housing. And in the interim period, they could plan for their long-term housing. Now, from the commencement of the ordinance up to now, the number of people affected by the ordinance has dropped drastically. So that's why in 2009, of the 26 hostels, run by NGOs. Well, all of them have closed their operation. And for 2 now being operated by NGOs, the occupancy rate has not reached full 100% all along. We will keep a close eye on the utilization rate. For these 2 hostels still in operation, I think they can meet the demand already. This is so ridiculous. You are telling a barefaced lie. We know that everyone has to wait for a place in Kowa Court, Kowa House, and the waiting time can easily take half a year or 1 year. Now, you said that the program was implemented because of the bed space apartments ordinance, but we have so many subdivided units all over Hong Kong. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of people affected. And the government also said that some 80,000 families are living in subdivided units. How come that we are turning a blind eye to these people, and you told us that these 2 hostels run by the NGOs can meet with the demand? This is so ridiculous. Chairman, I think we should hold a public hearing on this. You said that the 26 hotels were closed down because there was no need for housing from singletons. Well, I said this is a designated project to tie in with the bed space apartments ordinance. And the need has dropped drastically since the ordinance commenced. And in 2009, for the volunteer service organization, the 26 hotels run by them have all closed down. So these 26 hotels are dealing with the needs of occupants of the caged homes, right? I think the demand only goes up and not down, and the government is sitting on its hand. And the government is not dealing with the needs arising out of this ordinance, and you're disregarding the poor people. Dr. Lau Siu-lai, I think it's members have a hard job. Will you choose the government officials telling you lies, or putting up a show, or what? Well, her reply is nonsensical, saying that the 2 hostels are enough. We have some 2,000 street sleepers, and we have some 133,000 non-elderly one-person applications under QPS. I was infuriated by the reply. I think they are shameless. But I don't agree with Dr. Kwakaki's comment. It's not that the government doesn't have a policy towards the singleton. It is really discriminating against the singletons. There are so few flats built for singletons. If you start waiting at the age of 18, it will take you 30 years before you can offer the flat. So they have no choice but to live in a subdivided unit. But the government has even cancelled the subsidy for the N-have-nots. If they apply for CSSA, they may have rent allowance, but then the amount is very small. They have to pay on top of the rent allowance. Singletons, one-person singletons, have to pay the most on top of the rent allowance given to them. So the government is not doing anything about it. So the singleton people are always kept in the vicious cycle. They can't marry because they don't have a decent place to live in. They have a difficult time making ends meet, so they will not date, and they will not get married, and they will remain singletons forever. And if they can't afford the rent even, they will become street sleepers, and the government is not helping street sleepers at all, and they in fact the government is oppressing these street sleepers. So the government is adopting a discriminatory policy towards the singletons. So the government should relax its vetting or proceed vetting on singletons in getting a PRH units. You should also relaunch the rent subsidies for and have-nots. You should provide more PRH units for singletons. It's unreasonable to ask them to wait for 30 years. How can they have any hope in the future? I am a singleton myself. I think the society is discriminating against singletons. And I don't agree with Dr. Fernando Zhang's arguments saying that the policy or the society is particularly mean to male singletons. I think female singletons are treated meanly, in a mean way, by the society. Well, they are called surplus women, so to speak, in the society. So they are under great pressure to get married so that they will not be labeled anymore. So the society is very mean to the singletons. So the government, please review your public housing policy, and build more singleton hostel for both street sleepers and other singletons. If you don't do that, then a lot of Hong Kong people will not have any hope for the future. You have two questions. Do you have a discriminating policy against the singletons? And also the CCF, TW transport subsidy, etc. They are not there. They are not provided to singletons. Are these discriminatory against the singletons? With regard to the LIFA, low-income working family allowance, and this was launched in June 2015. This is a brand new project, and we saw that in the statistics on poor people, though some family members work full-time, but they have to support for a large number of people in the family, so they get a very heavy burden to bear. So that's why we launched this LIVER program. We want to achieve two objectives, policy objectives. First, we hope that people can be self-reliant. Well, please don't give us the details of LIVER. We are asking you whether singletons are entitled to LIVER. I'm about to get there. We want to also resolve the problem of intergenerational poverty. So if you have a child in your family, you get some extra subsidy for the child. So we hope that we can ease the family burden through this program. Now for singletons, if they work full-time and under the SMW, they should be able to fend for themselves rather well, so they're not covered LIVER. And you start from the WITS, we have started the dual-track system already, and singletons can apply for the transport subsidy under WITS. With regard to housing departments, singletons have to wait for some 30 years before they are offered a flat. My information shows that it's 26 years, and she said it's 30 years. So how is the situation like now? Mr. Lee? There are two types of singletons. One is an elderly singleton. They are in the general applicants category. The average waiting time is 2.16 years. And for the non-elderly singletons, we don't have a specific target for waiting time for them. The public housing resources are limited, and we accord priority to the family applicants and the elderly singleton applicants. Will singletons have to wait for a long time? Well, it depends on the age of the applicants, how long he's been waiting, and whether he lives in a PRH unit.
Elderly applicants have higher points, and they have a chance of getting public rental housing unit. And for younger applicants, they will have to wait longer. Therefore, we don't have specific numbers on the actual waiting time. Why there is none for non-elderly singletons? The number of years they have been waiting. You should have the numbers. Non-elderly singletons, how many years should they have to wait before getting a unit? Lau Xiulai said 30-odd years. I heard 20-odd years. And you said depending on the situation. What's average? What is the average? It's different from you start and when you get it. More than 30 years. They help the elderly just lightly. They help the divorce cases just lightly. And then just help a little bit, but not for singletons, not even lifting a finger. So the government discriminates against the singletons. Mr. Leung Kok-hong. As for elderly, 2.6 years. Now, you start out as a singleton on elderly, and when you become an elderly, you get the unit in 2.6 years' time. Is it the case? That's what I heard you. Well, then you better go to heaven. But it's also difficult to get a columbarium niche. Now you say because of resource allocation, you cannot help the singletons. And that's the crucial point. I just want to ask you why the singletons cannot exercise their rights within the system. Why there is a systemic inability to exercise their rights. The LWB. There are different categories of families, and we'll provide a service to them. When they come to our department, the social welfare department will give them a suitable service. Your policy is based on the family, right? That's for the disclaimer, disclaimer statement for not supporting one's parents. Say, if a parent wants to get double OH allowance, then the child will have to sign a disclaimer. If there's a family, then family will help the individual. Is it your policy? Yes, of course. But someone who doesn't have a family to help him, shouldn't you help him then? Should he suffer from discrimination? There is no family to support him. He cannot break open the doors of other families and ask for help. For a person who doesn't have a family, you should help them because you have a family-based approach in the provision of service. That's your policy. That's your principle. Do you understand the point? Why there is such a policy? What's the crime of being single? Tell me. How can he answer you? And what's the crime of being single? Well, that's original sin, if not crime. Now, the farmers depend on land. And in this day and age, the singletons suffered most. They don't have children. They don't contribute to the future labor force. Is it because of this? 459,015 singletons. What original sin do they have? Is it because they don't contribute to the labor force? No one to be exploited, and therefore they don't contribute anyone to be exploited, and therefore you penalize them? Well, different people have different needs, and we will give our service according to their needs. Well, don't the singletons have housing needs? Have you given them a sort of inoculation so that they are immune from any social problems? Is it that they don't give birth to children and therefore they don't contribute to the future labor force and you penalize them? I think that's the case. Mr. Leung, don't you need to declare interest? You are a singleton. Well, I have no children. I'm an elderly. I'm an elderly already. Mr. Zhang Chuchun. Mr. Chairman, we want to expose this issue to draw public attention. I'm not so naive that the administration is able to address our questions. The administration just has nothing, has no policy to provide support to the singletons. You just get angry when you read the first page. They say that support is given on a family basis. So if there are excess resources, they will give some help to the singletons. Otherwise, the resources just sit there. The frontline officers, whether it is the SWD or the Home Affairs Department or the Housing Department, they can cheat you. They say they can cheat us. They can say there is a review and there's a direction. But our social structure is having more and more singletons, whether they become singletons out of choice or they cannot get married or whether they are divorced. As for me, there is no mechanism for me to get married. No, there is none. Well, I can apply for JR against housing policy. That's a kind of indirect discrimination. I do want to go to the family-based system to seek LIFA, to get housing, but there is no such mechanism. This is it. I have a question for the singleton hostel, but having heard the exchange with the Home Affairs Department, everybody is disappointed. The question actually is whether there should be, whether singleton hostels should be built. Those hostels have been phased out. Have the doors been closed and have the buildings be put to other uses? Can that be relaunched? Can hostels be relaunched? The answer, it was said it was to deal with the bed space apartments. But since there is none, there is no bed space apartment now in Hong Kong. Therefore, there is no need to have singleton hostels. So, should we first have bed space apartments, and then you will provide the singleton hostels? Now, at the Youth Commission, there was a proposal. I think it was in the Donald Tsang era. There was a proposal of youth hostels. Those who had a chance, who were qualified at that time, has become too old for the youth hostels. So can you relax the age limit so that the hostels will not be youth hostels but singleton hostels? Can a piece of advice be given to the CE that your youth hostels, which were proposed in 1990s, the one that was next to the Manmo Temple, proposed to be put up next to the Manmo Temple, might fall flat on its nose. It's better for the administration to find land and put up youth hostels. Well, I don't expect an answer from you. The policy intent is to replace the bed space apartments. But if you look at the present-day situation, the present problems, so that there can be a new policy to deal with them. Well, concerning the 2011 policy address, the 6 youth hostels, what's the situation? Have they all disappeared? Thank you, Chairman. As for the youth hostel program, the program was announced in 2012 and 11-12, and then there was one, and then now there are 6 going on. One has obtained money and works have started. One has got money for detailed studies, detailed design studies. So we are working on that. The earliest is expected to be completed next year for young people, by the end of next year for young people. This is a youth development program. The hostel is not simply for singletons, not only for singletons. There are some units. These are units for young people. That's for your reference. Please note that the 2011 policy address, that was in the 2011 policy address, and the earliest, the newest can only be completed, the earliest can be completed in 2018. And how many places are there? 80. Well, you successfully obtained 80 units. Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Nathan Law. From the above exchanges, you can see that the officials have no heart, and they don't have any will to solve the problem. Just look at the answer to the singleton hostel program. You know that it's bureaucratic. The cage apartment problem arose out of housing needs. The same answer can be subdivided units and also capsule units. There is no more bed space apartment, and yet there are still problems. The officials just ignore the subdivided units and the capsule units. That's bureaucracy. The single hostel program is to protect those who live in bed space apartments. With the disappearance of caged units or cage apartments, they are just living in other types of substandard housing. Do you have the courage to embark on a new policy, introduce a new framework, not just the bed space apartment ordinance? You introduce a new framework to help those who have similar housing needs to those who lived in cage apartments in those years. Considering the 6 hostels, have they been demolished or have the buildings been returned to the relevant departments? The Home Affairs Bureau that was managed by the Volunteer Development Council. In 2009, the hostels ceased operation. The premises were returned to the owners. The 2 remaining singleton hostels have the following situation. The bed space apartment problem has been dealt with by and large. My question is not about bed space apartment. Even if there is no bed space apartment, people live in subdivided units. The problem does not disappear. So will there be a new policy? We don't rely on the bed space apartment ordinance. We rely on other indicators to reconsider the introduction of singleton hostels. Let's set aside bed space apartments. Let's look into the housing needs of singletons. Will there be a new consideration? Will you consider their needs? Chairman, I've just said that the 2 hostels have relaxed their admission criteria. The applicant can be living in a bed space apartment or subdivided units. It's about the whole policy.
I think the government office is not responding to my question. You are just trying to obscure the facts. I'm asking whether you would be building more units for those in need. Chairman, as I said, the admission criteria would include those who are living in partitioned units and bed spaces. And the occupancy rate over the past few years is just 85%. I'm asking whether they will build more. She's not answering my question. We think the demand has been met, so we don't have any plans to expand the project. Well, I think you are cheating yourself as well as others. If you say that 2 hostels can meet all our needs, I don't know what's the government's problems that they have arrived at this conclusion. We see so many people living in subdivided units. Hewa Court, what is this? Let me add. It's for people aged 18 to 59 who are living in small units, partitioned flats, etc. And they should have lived in a space of less than 5.5 square meters. So a lot of people cannot move into these hostels in Hewa Court. And they have to be relocated after a certain period. So when they talk about the occupancy rate of 85%, please have regard to the model of its operation of what I said. But even if it is not desirable, a lot of people are still queuing up for it. Okay, any other member wishing to speak for the first round? I will exercise my power as a chairman to extend the meeting till 1 p.m. Second round, 2 members would like to speak. After they are finished, then we will deal with the AOB. Dr. Lau Siulai, 3 minutes, please. Yes, enough for me. Chairman, I would like to follow up on the rent allowance. Right now, subdivided units are very costly, and singleton and couples have to live there. So can we provide a rent allowance for singletons at the level as that for the couples? I think our policy is discriminatory against the singletons. Let's look at the 2 hostels, the area. The number of places in singleton hostel should be increased. There are some 400,000 singletons in Hong Kong and 2,000 street sleepers, and the area is 5.5 square meters. It's even smaller than a cell unit. Is this an appropriate area so that singletons can be adequately housed? Let alone there is a limitation on the period of occupancy. So will the government review its policy in terms of the number of places and also the space for each singleton in these hostels? HAB, or rather HAD, Ms. Wang. Thank you, Dr. Lau, for your question. Let me try to explain once again. For this singleton hostel program, it is not for long-term accommodation for affected people. The original intent of implementing the program is to provide short-term accommodation for the affected people so that in the interim period they can arrange for long-term accommodation on their own. And going by our records, we see that the lodges there have been assisted by the HAD and the SWD in terms of their accommodation. So this is not for providing long-term accommodation. So in terms of the shared facilities and the area for each person, they are not designed for long-term accommodation. Would you make use of the remaining time? No? Well, I'll hand over the time to the next one. Mr. Lam Kwok Hong, Chairman. According to the ICSCR, and also in the basic law, we said we should implement that convention. So can you undertake that there will be housing benefit for the singleton, or you promise that you will definitely provide a columbarium niche for them. Either one will do. If they can't get a flat when they're alive, at least if they can be assured of a niche when they have passed away. So can you consider that? I understand your reply. Heiwa Court is there not for long-term accommodation. Actually, I've sent somebody to live there myself. And you will be asked to go away after a certain period. Now we've got some 400,000 singletons in Hong Kong. We've got some 2,000 street sleepers. So if we have all the street sleepers staying in Heiwa House, then it will be filled to capacity. So what's your policy objective? Will you have a policy for these 400,000 people in providing housing support to them? Well, of course, if they get married, then they will not be covered. So do you have such a policy, administration? Housing Department, can you respond? Thank you, Chairman. On housing for singletons. Under the long-term housing strategy, we want to increase PRH as a whole. In the housing panel, we have also discussed this. We hope that we can increase public housing units by 280,000 units in the next 10 years. No matter it's PRH or subsidized sale flats, singletons should be eligible to apply for those. There are so many vacant premises, vacant government buildings. Can that be used immediately? And for so many sites which are on short-term tenancy, they are now being used for storing scrap metal and so on. Can you make use of those sites? A lot of people are putting up structures on those sites as well. In Wangchao, people have built certain structures on those, and they ask you to refrain from removing them. But why aren't these sites used for building housing for people to live in? For vacant sites that those fall under the ambit of the Development Bureau, but for school premises, the Education Bureau and the Lands Department have a regular mechanism to look at those sites, and the Housing Department also participates in the meetings. We have, in fact, in the past used vacant sites to build public housing, as long as the certain criteria are met. Now you can actually retrofit some of the buildings and then move people in immediately. You don't have to rebuild all the time. Heiwa House. Mr. Wong said that there is an 85% occupancy rate. There is still some vacant slot, but you know that people can live there only for 5 years, and so that means in fact 85% is represents full house, because of course there may people moving in and out all the time. So 85% occupancy is already full house. So don't tell me that there is still there are still vacant places and we don't have to consider their needs. Well, we will be having a public hearing on the subject of singletons. Members, do you agree that we hold a public hearing on support for singletons? Any objection? Mr. Ho, you object to it? You don't want to say anything here? It's not that we shouldn't consider the issue of singletons, but I don't think there is a pressing need. We need to care for those in need in Hong Kong generally, but for singletons, we should not be taking care of them for their entire life. Singletons maybe in a stage of singleton, well, for a certain period of time, and we are not practicing welfareism in Hong Kong here. And we are not having a social welfare services in Hong Kong, which are a type of seamless type of service. We have held many public hearings before, but for the matter or the subject of singletons, I don't think there is a priority for us to hold a public hearing. We have so much work to do, so we should focus on that. We have so many meetings already, so let's not hold meetings for the sake of holding meetings. I don't think there is any urgency or pressing need here. So let's put that to a vote. Those who are in favor of holding a public hearing on support services and policy support for singletons, please raise your hand. For those who are against, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you very much. So this suggestion is passed. So I'd like to thank the administration for coming here. So family-based approach is right, but then if we think this is the only focus, then it will pose pressure to other groups in the society. Okay, the last item will be, and that is the Asian Forum of Parliamentarians on Population and Development, and also the Multitask Stakeholder Forum investing in healthy aging and active aging and for sustainable growth, and AFPD Standing Committee, which we held from the 15th to the 17th of August. The President has asked the panel to send 3 members to attend the meeting. The deadline for application is the 31st of May. If more than 3 members would like to join, well, first of all, we have to see whether we would accept the invitation and whether we would accept non-panel members to join. Now, second thing that we have to deal with, if more than 3 members are interested, we will draw a lot. I will be responsible for drawing the lot. So let's first decide on whether we would accept the invitation. Any objection to accepting the invitation? If there is none, then we will notify you in writing of the meeting. So within May, we will seek your interest. If there are more than 3 members, we will draw the lot. The deadline for enrollment is the 31st of May. Thank you very much. So meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming.